Well, hello and welcome. My name is Paul Schultz, and I am a faculty development and coaching specialist here at UAGC. I will be the host for this session entitled Educational Impostorism, the Impact of and Prevalence of Imposter Syndrome in Students Entering Higher Education Institutions and Strategies to Overcome the Feeling of Being a Fraud. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. My microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled live transcription. If you would like to use it, click the live transcription button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I am pleased to introduce to you Dr. Asia Ghazi, a University of Arizona Global Campus Associate Faculty Member in the Department of BA in Business Leadership. Dr. Ghazi, you're up.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. Let me make sure you can all hear me well. I think you all can. And so I'm ready to present on educational impostorism, the impact of and prevalence of imposter syndrome in students entering higher education institutions and strategies to overcome the feeling of being a fraud. Now, before we begin, I know that I had asked all of you to take a poll. If you were able to see a poll and you were able to answer that poll, I just wanted to make sure that you were able to take it. That poll was asking you whether you had ever experienced a sense of belonging in the university or not. The poll said, during your first year attending college or university, did you feel a sense of belonging? And I see 20 responses, so a bunch of you just responded, which is great. And I see that out of the 20 people that have responded to this poll right now, many of you have said no. Many of you have said that during your first year of attending college, you did not feel a sense of belonging. So we're going to talk about that today, because all of that is inherently connected with impostorism. So a quick look at my abstract. There is an inherent bias against students who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, as we call them, attending predominantly white colleges and universities. For instance, ethnic minorities only represented approximately 21% of graduate enrollments in higher education institutions in 2006. The roadblocks in higher education occur for BIPOC students, especially in terms of learning, receiving feedback, and limitations on resources needed to become successful in completing college. As a result, student success for underrepresented minorities are changing as students feel they do not belong, and that's a big deal. They do not belong, have self-doubt, and feel as if they're imposters, all of which are collectively known as the imposter phenomenon. This study explores what educational impostorism is and the impact that this has on students studying in higher education institutions. The term imposter phenomenon is defined and strategies are discussed for both students and higher education institutions so they can partner with and empower their students with conquering imposter feelings for better student success outcomes. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what imposter syndrome is. We're going to talk about what it is that the students start to feel, especially when they're getting into college. And we're going to talk about some strategies that I was able to find with my research that students and universities can use to help overcome that lack of sense of belonging, that feeling of I'm a fraud, that feeling of I don't belong here, to make it so that students feel that they belong and feel that they're able to be successful in their outcomes. Now, 70%, and you can look at this in a lot of literature that's out there on imposter syndrome, 70% is the magical number that we found, that the number of people that will experience imposter syndrome in their lifetime, 70%. Now, that's a pretty significant number for a few reasons. At some point in our lifetime, And not everybody's going to experience it, because I know people personally who have never experienced imposter syndrome. And I know people personally, and if I'm raising my hand, I've been also a victim to feeling the imposter syndrome effects. And so a number of people are going to experience this, and they're going to experience it in different ways. But 70% is a huge population of the world that's going to feel it in some sort of manner. And I just want you to really think about that. And as I'm going through this presentation, I want you to kind of think within yourself, have you ever felt imposter syndrome, whether it was in a school situation, when you were maybe in undergrad or graduate school, or even if you were working at a job or you got a promotion, if there was any sense of that feeling, think about it. Think about whether you meet that 70% criteria, especially as we talk about what imposter syndrome is. And if you can, go ahead and just raise your hands in your, I think there's one of those raise hand thingies on Zoom. What do they call them? If you wanted to raise your hand, I went back. If you wanted to raise your hands and let me know if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome, that would be great as well. And it'll give me kind of an idea of what you're all going through. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, you all found those hand gestures on Zoom. Yes. Yeah. So wonderful. Thank you so much for letting me know that. Yes. So a little bit about what imposter phenomenon is. I know a lot of you who've dealt with it will know what it is, but just a quick background about it, because this is an important part of the study. This imposter phenomenon, as they called it back then in 1978, it's now known as imposter syndrome, but it is the phenomenon. It's not a real syndrome. I wanted to put that out there, because we want to distinguish the fact that even though it's called imposter syndrome, it is not an actual syndrome. It is not a psychological syndrome that you would find in the diagnostics manual for psychologists. However, there are a lot of mindset phenomenons that happen with the feeling of being an imposter, and that's why they call it a syndrome, because it could lead to other things. But imposter phenomenon was first discovered by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes back in 1978. They conducted a pivotal study on 150 high-achieving women. Now, these women were PhDs, they were doctors, they had very great jobs, they were top of the line, they were executives. And when the study was conducted, Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes found that these women inherently believed that no matter how successful they were, they still felt that they were intellectual frauds. They said, we're fooling people. We people think that we know what we're doing, but we really don't think we know what we're doing. We just happen to be there at the right time. I don't know how many of you have thought about that yourself. If you got in a promotion or something great happened to you, you're like, oh, I just happened to be there at the right time. And that was kind of that main issue here, was they thought it was luck, or that it was maybe a really bad judgment on the part of the person that hired them or gave them a promotion. And in the school setting as well, we have heard of students that had said, I can't believe I got accepted into this university. Are you sure this isn't wrong? Are you sure this is not a joke? Because there's no way with my GPA or with my background that I would even be able to get into this prestigious school. And so with that idea, they really thought that, oh, no, it can't be true. It is true, but people that have the sense of not believing in their own faith or abilities, or feel that they're intellectual frauds, will not necessarily believe that what they actually received, promotion, enrollment in a good university, is something that was due to their own merits. They will always think it was something of a judgment or something of that nature. And the biggest issue with the imposter phenomenon that they found was that a lot of these women felt that they would be exposed to others as intellectual cons. Now, obviously, it's involved. And imposter syndrome doesn't just affect women anymore. It affects men as well. It affects everybody. It affects, teenagers. It affects college students. And that's why we're talking about this. Really, it's evolved into a professional distrust in one's own accomplishments and capabilities. And in a study that was done by Levant et al., they actually shared the effects on medical students. I thought this was really interesting, and I wanted to discuss this. They showed imposter feelings, and it was found that they were afraid of failing. They didn't want to share recognition because they were afraid that they were not going to succeed. They were going to fail. So they were afraid to do that. And even in the study, though, we do see that more women than men showed this situation of the fear of failure, and females were looked to work harder to achieve higher grades, and they were more worried about other people's opinions than the men, which I thought was interesting. Now, some more literature on BIPOC and impostorism. According to a study by McGee et al., we see that underrepresented minorities really feel the effects of imposter syndrome, but they come in different ways. In this study by McGee, Black doctoral students studying in the STEM field experienced racialized stress, as they found that they didn't have a sense of belonging, in contrast to their Asian and white peers, as well as faculty members. One of the things that they felt was that they're in this doctoral program, they're trying to get their STEM degree and get that field experience, but they were constantly told that what they thought was racism wasn't racism, but it was actually imposter syndrome. However, in this study by McGee, because the campus administrators were always telling these Black doctoral students, oh, no, you're not experiencing racism. There's no racism here. It's imposter syndrome. That's what you're experiencing. Well, the reality is, according to their study, was that this was actually experienced as both racism and impostorism. The racism that they felt from in the school led them to feel that they were not good enough, led them to feel that they didn't belong. And so that ended up making them feel that they were imposters. Now, here's the thing. I call this imposter transference. This was a term that I found when I was doing my original dissertation on women engineers in the STEM field and how they overcame imposter syndrome. And so one of the things my participants said was, well, I didn't necessarily feel imposter syndrome, but I had other people telling me I wasn't good enough, and I believed it. And that's imposter transference. So if you think about in psychology, we have a term of transference there. This is the same kind of idea, that when someone is telling you you're not good enough and they tell it to you enough times, you can feel it. And I've also personally gone through it, being made fun of from a young girl all the way till I was in high school, constantly being told I wasn't good enough in something, or I was, I didn't look good enough. I wasn't good enough. And that as well can transfer and make you believe in yourself in a negative way. Again, like I said earlier, it is very much of a mindset issue too. Now, BIPOC students who enter college have said that they feel that they are questioned about whether or not they belong when they're constantly being asked about their SAT scores or grades. So if you have, for example, if you've taken an SAT score and you got in, or you have your grades, and then other people are asking you, yeah, like, so how did you do on your SAT scores? Oh, well, did you get a 4.0 this term? Because I got a 4.0. How did you do? And so, especially for students that are BIPOC students, it felt as if, according to Pandika, it felt as if, do I really belong here? Because if they're questioning my SAT scores, or they're questioning my grades, and they're questioning the work that I do, maybe this isn't the place for me. And so this leads to systemic oppression and racism that would create an environment for imposter syndrome. And so basically, externally and internally, the systemic oppression and racism that BIPOC students are already feeling, especially when they're entering predominantly white universities and colleges, see this and feel, okay, well, we look different from them. We have different ways of things that we're doing, different cultural beliefs. I'm also a person of color, right? I'm Pakistani Indian. And although I was born here in the United States, it doesn't take away the fact that, I am also a person of color. I'm also someone who's a BIPOC student, and that even for me at a young age, being asked about my grades or my scores did make me feel like, okay, I don't want to share that information because I'm not sure what others are going to think about me. And so that would lead to that not feeling that you belonged, or not feeling that you were good enough as these other students that are questioning you, or even the faculty that question you. And that was something that I went through. And so I can say that firsthand, externally and internally, these things can happen. And this is due to societal roles and norms. What we think about other people who look different from us, we all have different cultural beliefs. We all have different ways of doing things. And that can affect the way that we are in society and how we behave, and what other people think about us. And so these are the issues that actually take away the sense of belonging for students, according to Pandika. They don't feel accepted because they're being told that they're imposters explicitly. So you're not good enough, you can't do this. And implied, which they're believing internally because they've taken that in so much, it ends up causing burnout. That's another thing that I studied in this, burnout. Because students continue to try and excel harder and harder. You're constantly seeing them work harder because they feel like the harder we work, the better grades we get, the more we're going to belong and be accepted. But that causes burnout feelings. And there's been a study, even in the medical field, medical students getting burnout because they've been working quite a bit and working harder to show up, only to feel a sense of burnout. They get tired. They start to feel that they can't handle any more work. Now, how do BIPOC students experience educational impostorism? Let me go back and talk about educational impostorism really quickly. Educational impostorism is the feeling of not being good enough in educational settings where you are encouraged to get a degree, you're encouraged to have good scores, good grades, and you have your fellow peers and maybe even your faculty telling you that you're not good enough. And I've experienced this myself. When I was going to community college, I had a professor. I was a computer science major. Hard to believe, I know. But I was a computer science major, and I had a professor who took me aside one day and just said to me, this is not the right field for you. You're not really good enough in being a computer scientist because you're not understanding the material. And I really wasn't understanding the material, and I needed help in that. But rather than helping me to understand it, it was more like, well, you're not good enough to be a computer science major. You should go and enter library science. And I was like, really? I was taken aback. I said, really? Rather than helping me, you would suggest that I would major into something that you think is easier for me to grasp. Okay. And to me, that made me feel that, okay, I didn't belong. Maybe this wasn't the right major for me. And I ended up completely dropping that major. And I wanted to share that because that's a story of a part of educational impostorism that some of us might feel at some point in our college or university lifetime. And what students experience, for us to also understand, because as faculty, we want to make sure that our students are given support and that they feel that they belong. And we want to make sure that we're not causing anything for them that's going to make them feel a negative mindset towards their own education and their ability to complete their education. So BIPOC students experience educational impostorism by dealing with racial identity, lack of self-esteem, non-inclusive environments, microaggressions, unconscious discrimination, gender issues. We see a lot of gender discrimination, gender biases, cultural differences. A lot of times the students have a fear of standing out. And if you'll notice that sometimes you'll have students in the classroom that don't want to speak up or don't want to talk, it's partly that reason that they're afraid to stand out. They're afraid that other people are going to start paying attention to them, and maybe create a negative bias about them. There's a family background, upbringing, and culture as well, and a lack of sense of belonging and inclusion. And only 21.4% of graduate education enrollment comes from BIPOC students. I thought that was really interesting, not just undergraduate, but actually graduate students, only 21.4%, which is a low number. We want to increase that number at some point. Now, for many BIPOC students, imposter syndrome comes from the family. So if you've had family members that have said to you, oh, you got to get an education, this is important for you, and that person feels that this is priority, that can also lead to imposter syndrome. When you're not receiving you're not receiving positive feedback or acknowledgement, or you're getting different feedback from different people in your family. One is saying one thing, another person saying another thing, your teachers are saying something else, your friends are saying something else. Interests and talents might be different. And for some of these students, a lack of parental involvement, love, and care have also caused imposter syndrome to kind of simmer within until it comes out when they're in the university level. Race and socioeconomic status also affect students attending college or university, and some first-generation students have higher dropout rates, more so than second and third generation students. And educators are already conditioned to look at BIPOC individuals differently. Additionally, BIPOC students can sense impostorism when they don't see non-white faculty as well. This is according to Testify. So we just want to put that in our minds that if we're being conditioned to look at BIPOCs individually, rather than as a whole, rather than as all students combined, that also makes them feel that there's a lack of sense of belonging. Now, there were 4 research questions that were asked for this study. How do students experience a sense of educational self-doubt that will soon be discovered by others? What practices and strategies have students used to overcome self-doubt and develop their educational identity? How do students measure and track the sense of belonging in the classroom? And finally, what recommendations would students have for other students regarding dealing with educational impostorism? The research methodology that I have been using has been qualitative phenomenological, which means that I do interviews with people and I get to understand what's being expressed through participants' rich experiences. And then I collect the data from those 10 semi-structured interview questions the participants answered and analyze the BIPOC students who attended college or university within the United States. That's my population, and I would analyze their data and results to get the findings. And so part of the findings were this: students' desire to seek help and assistance from their professors and peers. Thus, mentorship and having positive support systems would help them with creating a sense of belonging. The second finding was professors and students should collaborate with each other so that students can have better learning outcomes and set achievable goals. Now, these findings are based on what we can do to help overcome the feelings of educational impostorism. So making sure that mentorship and positive support systems are around, that professors and students collaborate with each other so students can have better learning outcomes and are able to set achievable goals. Professors and administrators who provide positive reinforcement, meaning that you acknowledge and celebrate students, help them to feel that they belong and are comfortable within their educational surroundings. Students say that being included within their classroom and within the university or college helps them to create a sense of belonging. And I want to go further. I didn't add it in here just yet, but I want to go further, that not just being included with the classroom, but including them in things that we're doing. For example, at another university that I work at as a grad assistant, we involve our students by getting them to become speakers at our events so that they can talk about their journey and stories. And that helps to provide that inclusion for them. And so we can do that within our university system here with other universities to be able to really create inclusion. So they're included in clubs, they're included in events that we're doing in the classroom and outside the classroom. That really helps them to create that sense of belonging. And it is important to create a culture where diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are a large part of the student's success system, no matter whether the college or university is an online, hybrid, or in-person university. I think if we have, coming to the culture of care that we have here at the University of Arizona Global Campus, when we have that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and we allow that into the student success system, they're going to be more successful because they're going to feel that belonging. They're going to feel that they're included. They're going to feel that there's fairness. They're going to feel that there are so many people that are like them within that same setting in that university. And it will make them feel that they belong. Now, we have a 4-step model. Now, this 4-step model I had comes from my previous study on women engineers in the STEM field, but I wanted to share this because it's the same thing as in accomplishing. It's the same thing. Sorry, I'm hearing noise in the background, and I think someone's banging on the wall there, so I'm hearing it. But the model of conquering inadequacy and impostorism here I have are 4 areas. Accomplish, where you are creating a set of goals and securing a mentor. So a student can do this. They can set a goal. They can set goals. They can maybe secure a mentor, a coach, even a counselor at the college or university to help them with setting maybe their academic goals. It's important for students to have support systems because I believe that when we have support systems, when we have people that are able to advise, that are able to give us information, friends, family, significant others, professors, administrators, and deans, the students are going to feel that they are being included and that they're being cared for, and that's very important. Again, also investment is something that I wanted to put in there, because a lot of times we want to invest in our own students as well, and we want our students to invest in themselves. So providing them extra mentorship, providing them extra help as they need them, giving them options for even more continuing education and courses that they can take. Again, this is a model from my women in engineering and how they overcame imposter syndrome. But I share this because it's the same things that I'm finding here. And finally, again, acknowledgement. As I said previously in my findings, when we acknowledge and celebrate and provide positive reinforcement, students feel that they belong. And that's that same concept. So when we're acknowledging and celebrating our students and their successes, it's a very good and positive thing. So we just want to be able to measure that. And with that said, these are just some of my references. I've got a lot more to add, but I didn't have enough time for the slides. But thank you for your time. We have 5 minutes for question and answers. So feel free to open up for chat.
We do have a question. And
okay.
From Dr. Ryan, it says, is there nothing in the research that shows Caucasians also may feel this? For example, individuals who may have been disenfranchised for whatever reason, such as economics and opportunity, may also feel the same. It's an uncomfortable feeling being around those who have had greater opportunity in economics. And she says, in her humble opinion.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ryan, for that question. And I do agree. I think that everybody experiences these issues and factors. And of course, my research is more focused on BIPOC. If I had been focusing on Caucasians as well, then that would be a different study, of course, that we would look into. And I'm pretty sure that they might have similar types of experiences. So that's something that I will definitely be looking at next. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, economic factors, yeah, you know, you have, if you're coming from a low SCS, you're coming from a background where you're not really receiving the same type of care, the same type of acknowledgement and things of that nature. Absolutely, they can feel that as well. There aren't many studies that I've seen. I have to do some more research. A lot of the studies right now that I've been doing happen on BIPOC students. However, I will go back and do some more research on Caucasian students and what they've been experiencing in terms of this. I believe that every student, though, does experience this in in some fashion or form, some kind of disparity. It doesn't matter if you're BIPOC or Caucasian. I mean, everyone experiences this. And again, when I go back to that statistic of 70% of people in the world would experience imposter syndrome, that absolutely, you know, includes, you know, everyone from every culture and race and background and ethnicity, because it doesn't leave that behind, and everyone can experience this. But I will definitely look into more studies into that. Thank you so much for that question and your opinion. I really appreciate that.
So another question, any newer in your references, they are referenced to 2006, or are there any newer references, or is your study, your work, some of the newest?
So yeah, my dissertation was one of the newest, but there have been studies in the last couple of years. I know these are a little bit older, and I still have to add my other references because I didn't even have enough space in here. But we've had some references coming in. Let me see here. Ahmed et al. 2020, very, very recent. Lee et al. And I've had a Chakravarti. Chakravarti has been doing a lot of, actually, she's been doing a lot of studies lately. I saw 2 of these articles from her where she's been doing a lot of studies on, you know, Latinx students and BIPOC students as well, and what they've been going through in terms of imposter syndrome. So there's a lot of studies out there and a lot more that are still coming out from what I've been seeing. I try to use studies within the last 10 years, and sometimes you do have to go back to older studies because you can kind of reference where that information is coming from in order for you to see the newer information and kind of like, observe where how the literature has evolved over time and what's changed and what's still the same.
Great. Well, listen, I hate to cut us off, but we are at time. Thank you, Dr. Ghazi, and thank you to the audience for your participation in today's session.